Why was the desert so quiet? The silence pressed in on her chest, heavier than the heat, heavier even than the weight of the rifle digging into her shoulder. From the rooftop of an abandoned building, Sergeant Hayes lay motionless, her breath shallow, her finger curled around the trigger guard of her Mk-12. 600 meters away, across a canyon that shimmered in waves of heat, 3 Marines were pinned down behind the skeletal remains of a burned-out truck. Their shouts carried faintly across the ravine, drowned by the staccato rattle of AK-47s. They moved like wolves in the brush, reckless, confident, tightening the noose. 6 of them coming from 3 angles, too fast, too close. The Marines had nowhere to go, exhaled, searching for her father's voice in her memory. Half a breath, he had always said. Not more, not less. Half a breath is the difference between a near miss and saving a life. Her scope danced with heat distortion, the canyon air currents unpredictable. It was the kind of shot that made even the most seasoned snipers curse. But there was no time to wait for perfect conditions. There never really was. She steadied her hands, let the rhythm of her own pulse slow. The trigger squeezed back, smooth and certain. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and through the scope she saw the first cartel fighter drop. 5 left. Then came the sound that split her world in two. A return shot, sharper, heavier, the crack of a 7.62, and then impact. White-hot pain erupted in her thigh. Her femur shattered under the force, the bullet tearing through muscle and bone with surgical cruelty. She bit down hard on her lip, stifling the scream that clawed its way up her throat. Blood pooled beneath her, dark and sticky, soaking into the rooftop concrete. 600 meters. That was the distance between her broken body and the men she had sworn to protect. 600 meters to safety or to death. The mission had gone catastrophically wrong, but its greatest test wasn't behind her scope anymore. It was just beginning. 6 months earlier, the helicopter descended toward Fort Murphy, kicking up swirls of dust that lashed at her face like needles. Clutched her worn tactical bag in one hand and her grandfather, spotting scope in the other. A piece of history, handed down through her family like a torch. The base rose out of the Arizona desert like a mirage, rows of tan buildings, razor wire, and shooting ranges that shimmered under the merciless sun. This was it, Scout Sniper Basic Course, the hardest school the Marine Corps had to offer. She'd read the numbers before she came. 70% washout rate. Combat veterans failed it every year. Most of the men here already carried deployment ribbons and stories of firefights that stretched late into the night. By contrast, had come from logistics, support. The kind of job that kept gears turning and rifles supplied, but far from the. She'd earned high scores in marksmanship, yes, but scores on a range and kills under fire were 2 different worlds. She felt their eyes before she heard their words. Who let support personnel into sniper school? The voice was a sneer wrapped in confidence. Sergeant Tyler Cooper, 1st Battalion. Combat stripes, hardened swagger, the kind of Marine who didn't just walk, he owned every step. This ain't a desk job, sweetheart. The word snapped against her like a whip, sweetheart. Laughter followed from a few others. Not all of them, but enough to let her know where she stood in the pecking order. Didn't answer. Words were wasted in places like this. Instead, she held the line of her posture, her chin slightly raised. She had learned long ago that silence could be stronger than retorts. Still, something burned inside her. Anger, maybe, but deeper than that, determination. They filed into the briefing room, the air cooler but thick with tension. Captain Morgan waited at the front, his weathered face carved by years of deployments. His eyes scanned the formation like a predator gauging prey. He began. His gaze fell on a pause and lady. Welcome to hell. The speech was sharp, clinical. They would eat, breathe, and bleed precision, but one phrase stuck in his chest like a splinter. Speed kills. Slow shooters don't survive. Quick on target, first on trigger. The motto was painted on the wall of the barracks. Speed, always speed. Shifted slightly in her chair. That wasn't how she had been taught. Not by her father, not by her grandfather. For them, the shot was never about speed. It was about patience, respecting the bullet's journey, waiting for the one chance that mattered. And yet here she was, standing in a world where speed was survival. That night, alone in the converted storage room that passed for female quarters, unpacked her things. Every item had its place. Her bunk neatly made, her notebook of ballistic tables stacked on the desk. She had calculated them all by hand: wind drift, bullet drop, earth rotation. Others used smartphone apps now, range finders that spat out numbers with a button press. Trusted math, not batteries. On the desk, her grandfather's scope gleamed in the dim light. She traced its worn brass edge with her fingertips, remembering the old man's words. Shooting isn't about strength. It's about knowing yourself. She whispered it aloud, a kind of prayer. A knock at the door, 10 minutes to formation haze. She snapped the notebook shut, time to face them again. Outside, Cooper held court with his followers. 387 yards, he bragged. Crosswind 20 miles per hour. Dropped him first shot. 7 seconds from acquisition to trigger pull. The men chuckled, impressed. Combat stories carried weight here. They were the currency of credibility. Cooper spotted her passing. What about you, support girl? Ever shot anything more dangerous than a paper target? Stopped, her eyes calm but sharp. 13-point buck, 800 yards, crosswind 15 miles per hour, 20-degree incline, one shot. Laughter rippled again, but not all of it mocking this time. Cooper smirked, brushing her off. Hunting isn't combat. No, said, the deer don't shoot back. They require more patience. She walked away, her boots crunching on the gravel. Behind her, silence followed. Not victory, not acceptance, but a dent in the armor of their assumptions. And sometimes a dent was enough to start a crack. The qualification range stretched before them the next day, sun baking the lanes into waves of heat. 12 targets scattered at unknown distances. The rules were simple: accuracy, time, 90 seconds to engage them all, 80% minimum hit rate. Cooper flexed his fingers like a boxer preparing for a fight. Ran the numbers in her mind: wind speed, target distance, drift. 90 seconds. It felt like a mockery of everything she'd been taught. Shooters ready, the range officer called. His heart slowed. The world narrowed to her rifle, the crosshairs, the invisible line between breath and bullet. The whistle blew. Cooper fired rapidly, each shot loud, quick, almost reckless. Worked methodically. Estimate, adjust, fire. Each round landing center mass, precise as a scalpel. But precision takes time. When the whistle ended, she was still on her 8th target. Captain Morgan examined the results. Her groupings were near perfect, better than anyone else on the line, but she hadn't finished the course. Hayes, his voice rang out. Outstanding accuracy, but failure to engage all targets, that's a fail. The laughter returned, quieter this time but cutting. By evening, the orders were waiting on her bunk. Reassignment to the armory, effective immediately. No second chance, no appeal, just a clinical dismissal typed in black ink. She stared at the paper, her vision blurring. 4 years of qualifications, a lifetime of practice, gone because she had been 15 seconds too slow. Outside, she heard Cooper's voice again. At least she can clean our rifles now. Don't scratch the barrel, sweetheart. The laughter stung, but folded the orders carefully, sliding them into her notebook. And in the margin of a page filled with calculations, she wrote a single line. Precision with purpose. Her family's legacy, her father's lessons, her own truth. She whispered it once softly, then again stronger. Precision with purpose. The words steadied her. She might not be fast enough for their test, but she knew something they didn't. Speed means nothing. If you miss the only shot that matters, why did failure feel so quiet? The next morning, reported to the base armory. her reassignment orders folded neatly in her breast pocket like a scar no one else could see. The armory was tucked away at the far end of Fort Murphy, a cavernous room filled with racks of rifles, the metallic tang of gun oil, and the faint echo of silence that only forgotten places seemed to carry. Master Sergeant Richard stood waiting, a weathered Marine in his 60s with calloused hands and eyes that had seen more wars than he ever admitted. He gave her a long look, then grunted. "So you're the sniper washout." The words weren't cruel, just blunt, stripped of pretense. "Yes, Master Sergeant," replied, standing rigid. "They say you shoot straight, just not fast enough for the young bucks." "Yes, Master Sergeant." A pause, his eyes narrowed, searching her for something. Finally, he nodded once. "Good, then you'll do fine here. These rifles don't care how fast you are. They care about patience, care about hands that don't cut corners." Something in his chest loosened. Not acceptance, not yet, but a reprieve. Richard showed her the rows of weapons, everything from M1 preserved like relics to the latest precision rifles, each one tagged, tracked, and cared for like living things. "Your primary duty," he explained, "is rifle maintenance and calibration. Secondary is ammo accountability. And tertiary," he gestured toward a corner terminal glowing faintly, performance tracking. "Performance tracking?" asked, curiosity sharpening her tone. He nodded. "Every shot fired on the range is logged. Distance, wind, stance, trigger pull, even the time between rounds. Supposedly it's just for instructors, but we maintain the system, which means we see more than we're supposed to." Stepped closer to the terminal, drawn like a moth to light. She'd always trusted data more than rumors. Numbers didn't lie. Richard's eyes softened. "Don't get ideas, Hayes. We're not supposed to analyze, that's their job. We just keep the records straight." But even as he said it, knew she couldn't look at numbers without searching for patterns. It was how her mind worked. Days turned into weeks, slipped into the rhythm of the armory, arriving before dawn, cleaning rifles, recalibrating scopes, reassembling bolts with the care of a surgeon. The candidates dropped by daily, tossing their weapons on the counter like they were nothing more than tools. Cooper was the worst. He swaggered in with his crew, his smirk sharp as ever. "How's the cleaning lady today?" he'd ask. "Make sure my scope's crystal, got a reputation to maintain." Kept her voice neutral. "Yes, Sergeant." But she noticed things, tiny things they never did. Cooper's rifle had a trigger flaw that pulled shots slightly right under pressure. Another candidate's scope slipped by fractions of a degree. Most of them never cleaned their weapons properly, too eager to get back to bragging and posturing. She fixed the flaws without comment, handing back rifles that shot better than when they'd been issued. They never thanked her, they didn't even notice. But she noticed, and she recorded everything. Her notebook, once filled with wind calculations, began to collect new entries, rifle numbers, common malfunctions, performance quirks. And then she started cross-referencing with the digital logs Richards had shown her. That's when the patterns began to emerge. Late one evening, the armory empty, sat at the glowing terminal scrolling through performance data. Line after line of numbers told stories no one else bothered to read. Cooper, fast times, always fast, but under stress simulations his accuracy cratered, wide-shot groupings missed targets, rushed breathing. Others showed similar cracks. The program's golden boys, the ones hailed as the best of the class, were failing where it mattered most. They could shoot quickly, but not precisely. Felt a cold certainty settle over her. This wasn't just her failure. The program itself was flawed. She began compiling the data, page by page, chart by chart. A report took shape under her hands, meticulous, undeniable. She titled it quietly, almost reverently, "Precision versus Speed, a Combat Readiness Analysis." The name felt dangerous, but it also felt true. The danger arrived sooner than she expected. Captain Morgan walked into the armory the next morning, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. Richard stiffened, setting down the rifle he'd been working on. "Hayes," Morgan said, his voice sharp. "We've had unusual access attempts in the range data systems. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Felt her pulse quicken, but she held his gaze. "Sir, I've been reviewing performance logs as part of my maintenance duties." "That's above your clearance." He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "And yet someone's been compiling reports that undermine my program." Silence gripped the room. Richard stepped in, his voice calm but firm. "Captain, I authorized Hayes to access data for maintenance. If there's a problem, it's on me." Morgan's jaw clenched. "The problem, Master Sergeant, is that this support staff," his words dripped disdain, "is overstepping. Hayes, you washed out of my course. What makes you think you're qualified to judge Marines who passed?" His voice was steady, though her heart hammered. "Because I've been fixing their rifles for weeks. I've seen what happens when precision matters, and I know the data doesn't lie." For the first time, Morgan's confidence faltered, just slightly, enough for her to see it. "You're walking a dangerous line, Sergeant," he said coldly. "Focus on your assigned duties. Stop playing instructor." He left without another word. The silence after was suffocating. Richards laid a hand on her shoulder. "You've got guts, Hayes, but you'd better be careful. Morgan doesn't like being challenged, especially by someone the program already rejected." Nodded, but inside, her resolve only sharpened. She had been dismissed too many times. This time she wouldn't stay quiet. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone else had overheard. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Parker, the new base commander, had been conducting an unofficial inspection when she caught the tail end of the confrontation. Later that afternoon, she summoned Richards to her office, her desk already spread with unauthorized report. "These numbers," Parker said, her voice low but steady, "are they accurate?" Richards hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Hayes has access to all the rifle data. Her analysis is solid. I've been saying the same for months, but no one wanted to hear it." Parker studied the pages. The numbers painted a grim picture: snipers graduating with speed but not precision, their accuracy degrading by nearly 40% under stress. And these were the Marines who would soon be deployed. She tapped the report with her pen. "This isn't just sloppy, it's dangerous." That evening, Parker appeared in the armory unannounced. Was bent over a scope, making minute adjustments, when the commander's voice cut through the silence. "Show me." Straightened, startled. "Ma'am." "Your report, your findings. Show me why speed isn't enough." For the next hour, walked Parker through the data. She showed rifles damaged by hasty handling, patterns of missed shots under stress simulations, and the long, damning history buried in records no one wanted to examine. "The real world," said finally, her voice soft but certain, "doesn't give you a countdown timer. It gives you one chance, and if you miss, people die." Parker's eyes lingered on her, sharp and unreadable. Then, at last, she nodded. "Continue your analysis. You report directly to me now." It was a lifeline and a warning. The shift was immediate. As access expanded, her work sanctioned. Morgan fumed, Cooper sneered, but she no longer answered to them. She was building something bigger now, something that might save lives. But late at night, alone in the armory, she still whispered the words she'd written in her notebook. "Precision with purpose." Because she knew the storm hadn't passed. It had only just begun. Why was she suddenly afraid of silence again? The morning of the inspection arrived without warning, but felt it in her bones before the announcement blared across the base PA system. The quiet had shifted. Vehicles she'd never seen before crowded the motor pool. Officers in pressed uniforms walked briskly past, avoiding eye contact. Security doubled overnight. Something big was coming. By noon, she knew what it was. Major General Thomas had arrived with an entourage, Pentagon officials, congressional staffers, even a media crew tasked with filming the Marine Corps' next-generation sniper program. The desert base had been polished, painted, and staged for their arrival. Watch from the armory window as the convoy rolled through the gates. She should have felt invisible, tucked away behind racks of rifles. Instead, her pulse pounded. In her desk drawer sat the report she had spent weeks compiling, Precision versus Speed, a combat readiness analysis. It was everything Parker had asked her for, everything that could expose the program's cracks. But would anyone listen? The morning's events played out like a theater production. On the range, Cooper and the other top candidates performed rapid-fire drills with mechanical confidence. Each target dropped cleanly, their times dazzling. From the VIP platform, applause erupted. "Remarkable," she overheard say as he passed near the armory. "We're producing combat-ready snipers in half the time." His jaw tightened. He wasn't wrong about the speed, but he hadn't seen the data, the widening shot groups under stress, the dangerous cracks hidden under the glossy surface. That afternoon brought the stress test, a staged combat scenario designed to impress. Smoke machines pumped haze across the range. Loudspeakers blasted the chaos of gunfire and explosions. Candidates sprinted, engaged multiple targets, reloaded with flourish. From the stands, it looked flawless. But wasn't on the stands. Through her grandfather spotting scope, hidden from the cameras, she saw what no one else could: the hurried breathing, the sloppy reloads, the widening shot patterns. And Cooper, Fort Murphy's golden boy, was cracking under the pressure. His shots spread wider with each burst of gunfire. Sweat poured down his temples. He looked less like a sniper and more like a man racing against a clock. Then something went wrong. A smoke generator malfunctioned, pumping far more haze than intended. The wind shifted, blowing the cloud across the range. Visibility dropped to near zero. From the stands, the VIPs laughed nervously, thinking it was part of the act, but knew better. She adjusted her scope, and her blood ran cold. A pop-up target had malfunctioned. Instead of appearing at 300 meters, it triggered at 600, directly in front of a maintenance crew working on another section of the range. The workers were downrange, unprotected, and they didn't know they were in the line of fire. Through her scope, she saw one of the candidates pivot, acquiring the target. From his angle, he couldn't see the workers beyond. To him, it was just another silhouette, another fraction of a second to shave off his time. Her mouth went dry. She tried the range control radio static. The comms were jammed for realism. She tried the emergency frequency, nothing. 3 seconds, that was all she had. Her mind screamed with every memory of rejection. "You're too slow, you're not combat material, support staff, paper pusher." None of it mattered now. She dropped her spotting scope, sprinted out of the armory and onto the hot range. "Cease fire, cease fire." Her voice ripped through the chaos, raw and unshakable. "Personnel downrange." For a heartbeat, no one listened. The candidate squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck dirt, less than 5 meters from the maintenance crew. The men dove for cover, finally realizing the danger. The exercise collapsed into chaos. Whistles, shouts, weapons cleared. Captain Morgan stormed toward her, his face a storm of rage. "Hayes, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Pointed toward the shaken maintenance crew. Her voice was steady, even as adrenaline shook her body. "Target system malfunction. They were in the line of fire. If I hadn't acted, they'd be dead." Lieutenant Colonel Parker appeared at her side, her expression controlled but lethal. "Is that true, Captain?" Morgan faltered. "Ma'am, that area wasn't supposed to be active. The system must have." "If Hayes hadn't acted," Parker cut in, her voice low and dangerous, "we'd be explaining to families why their loved ones were killed during a demonstration." General had heard it all. He stepped forward, his face grave. "A friendly fire incident during a VIP inspection. That's what we nearly had." "Yes, sir," said standing at rigid attention though her chest heaved with exertion. The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. The fallout came quickly. The range was shut down, the target system examined, investigations launched. Morgan glared at with a venom that could have cut steel, but Parker's gaze was different, steady, resolute. "Hayes," she said quietly, pulling her aside, "I want your full report on my desk in 1 hour. Everything you've documented, everything you observed today." Nodded, adrenaline still burning through her veins. "Yes, ma'am." For the first time, she felt her voice carry weight. 3 days later, she sat in Parker's office as General flipped through her thick report. Sticky notes marked half the pages. Highlighter bled across charts. "This is troubling," muttered. "You're telling me our emphasis on speed has created a dangerous gap in training." "Yes, sir," said. Her voice was steady, though her palms were slick with sweat. "The data shows a direct correlation. Faster qualification times equal lower performance under stress. The graduates aren't prepared for real-world combat." Captain Morgan sat stiffly in the corner. His voice dripped disdain. "With respect, General, Hayes failed our standards. She's biased. Her conclusions—" Cut him off, his gaze sharp. "3 days ago, I watched this Marine prevent a fatal accident because she was paying attention to safety instead of speed. That suggests your standards may be measuring the wrong things, Captain." Silence. Rose, packing the room, each step deliberate. "I'm implementing changes immediately. All current candidates will be reevaluated. Training protocols will be redesigned to emphasize adaptive marksmanship, knowing when to shoot fast and when to shoot perfectly." Then he turned to, his voice softened just slightly. "Sergeant Hayes, you will be reinstated as a sniper candidate, and you'll assist in developing the new protocols." The words hit her harder than any bullet. For a second, her knees threatened to buckle, but she held herself upright. "Sir," she said quietly, "I appreciate the confidence, but—" "No buts, Sergeant," interrupted. "You've demonstrated the judgment and precision we need. The question is, are you willing to help fix this program?" Her eyes flicked to Morgan, who looked as if he'd swallowed glass. To Cooper, whose smirk had vanished, replaced by something closer to fear. To Parker, whose gaze met hers with something like pride. Inhaled slowly. "Yes, sir, I'm willing." That night, alone in the armory, she sat with her rifle laid across her lap. Her hands moved in familiar motions, cleaning, oiling, reassembling. The ritual steadied her. Tomorrow she would return to the range, not as support staff, not as a washout, but as a sniper candidate again. The woman they had called too slow, too cautious, too precise, was about to show them that sometimes the very qualities dismissed as weakness were the only things that could save lives. But she also knew something darker. What she had uncovered, the cracks, the flaws, the obsession with speed, wasn't just a training problem. It was a battlefield problem. And sooner than anyone expected, the battlefield would come looking for her. Why did respect always come so slowly? Fort Murphy's range looked different now. The neat rows of targets, the manicured firing lanes gone. In their place rose obstacles, smoke generators, sound systems, and jagged terrain designed to mimic a battlefield. Where once the desert had been orderly, now it looked chaotic, alive. And at the center of it stood Hayes. She felt the weight of their stares. Candidates lined the dirt in loose formation, rifles slung over their shoulders, their skepticism visible even through their sunglasses. Cooper stood in the back, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. She inhaled, steadied her voice. "The protocol," she began, "is built on a simple premise. Combat isn't predictable. Your heart rate will spike. Your visibility will vanish. Intel will be incomplete, and your target won't wait for you to take the perfect shot." A murmur rippled through the formation. Some scoffed openly, others just watched, waiting to see if she'd stumble. Gestured to the redesigned range behind her. Starting today, you'll train under conditions that break your comfort zone. First, we'll measure your baseline accuracy. Then we'll add complications, one at a time: environmental stress, physical exhaustion, noise, incomplete information, and finally target discrimination, choosing between civilian and hostile targets when the clock is against you. A hand shot up. "With respect, Sergeant, that sounds like a great way to fail everyone." Met his gaze. "The standard isn't perfection. It's adaptation. Someone who maintains 85% accuracy under chaos scores higher than someone who shoots 95% in silence, but drops to 50 when the world falls apart." The murmurs grew louder. Then Cooper's voice cut through the noise, sharp as a blade. "And who made you the expert on combat pressure, Hayes? Last I checked, you've never seen action." The words landed heavy. He said what they all were thinking. She could feel it, their doubt, their scorn. The washout giving lectures to combat-tested Marines. Didn't flinch. "You're right," she said, her tone calm but firm. "I haven't seen combat. That's why this protocol isn't based on my opinion. It's based on data." She tapped the screen beside her, bringing up charts and graphs compiled from months of logs. Accuracy under stress, failures under real-world conditions, records of graduates who had faltered in deployment. "These numbers don't come from me. They come from your predecessors, snipers who trained here, snipers who deployed, snipers who froze or rushed or missed when it mattered most. The fastest shooters often had the worst records in combat. That's not my theory, it's fact." Silence stretched. "I'm not here to tell war stories," she continued. "I'm here to make sure you're ready for the reality these numbers represent. The protocol isn't about making training harder. It's about making it relevant." For the first time, doubt flickered in their eyes, not at her but at themselves. His voice softened, finding its rhythm. "Questions?" There were none. "Good. Baseline assessments begin in 30 minutes. Prepare your equipment." The formation broke, candidates dispersing with mutters and exchanged glances. Richards, standing at the edge of the range, gave her a small nod. Approval, quiet but firm. But Cooper lingered, his eyes locked on hers. Not mocking, not amused, something else, something harder to name. The first weeks were brutal. Candidates who had once breezed through training suddenly found themselves rattled. Forced to run 400 meters before shooting, their lungs burning, their hands shaking. Forced to engage targets while smoke blurred vision and explosions rang in their ears. Forced to choose, civilian or hostile, in split seconds. The results were damning. Accuracy rates plummeted. Tempers flared. More than once, candidates stormed off the range, muttering curses about pointless theatrics. But slowly the cracks began to shift. They weren't just failing, they were learning, adjusting, adapting. And the data reflected it. By the third week, stress-conditioned accuracy improved by 20% across the board. Candidates who had once prided themselves on speed began asking questions about breathing, posture, recovery. All except Cooper. For him, the protocol cut deepest. His speed-focused habits unraveled in the chaos designed. During a night fire exercise, his accuracy dropped to 40%, his shots wide, his frustration obvious. Found him later at the cleaning station, stripping his rifle with mechanical fury. She hesitated, then approached. "Rough day." He didn't look up. "I qualified top of my class in Afghanistan. Confirmed kills at 800 meters. Now I can't hit a target at 3 because some paper pusher decided to pump smoke in my face while blasting explosions in my ears." Stayed calm. Combat isn't a qualification course. He slammed a bolt down harder than necessary. "You think I don't know that?" His voice cracked with anger, but underneath it something else, something raw. "I've been there," he said, softer now. "Baghdad, 2018, perfect setup, perfect shot. Then an RPG hit the building next door, dust everywhere. I rushed, I missed, gave away my position, lost 2 men in the because of it." The words hung between them, a rare crack in the armor of his bravado. His voice was quiet. The protocol isn't about making you look bad, Cooper. It's about preventing that from happening again. He stared at her, his hands still. For a moment, he looked less like the cocky Marine who had mocked her at every turn, and more like a man who carried ghosts. Then finally he spoke, "Show me." They met at dawn the next morning, the desert painted in shades of gold and amber. Cooper stood at the range, his rifle already laid out. No swagger this time, no smirk. "You said the problem is stress, so how do I fix it?" Set down her own gear, her movements deliberate. By understanding it, most shooters fight stress. They grip, rush faster, but stress isn't the enemy, you work with it. She demonstrated tactical breathing. 4 count inhale, 4 hold, 4 exhale, 4 hold. She explained body positioning, micro pauses between shots, the mental reset that separated reckless fire from deliberate action. Cooper watched, skeptical at first, but when he tried it, when he let the rhythm of his breathing guide his shots, something shifted. His groupings tightened, his recovery time shortened. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. He lowered his rifle, glancing at the printouts handed him. Side by side, his initial scatter and his final grouping told the story. "This approach," he shook his head, "it's the opposite of everything I've been taught." Met his eyes. "Which works fine when conditions are perfect, but when are conditions ever perfect in combat?" For the first time his smirk returned, but softer, without edge, almost a smile. "Fair point." Word spread quickly. If Cooper, the program's golden boy, was buying into the protocol, maybe it wasn't just theatrics after all. Other candidates followed. Questions became sharper, training more engaged. By the 4th week, the data was undeniable. Under stress conditions, accuracy across the class rose 23% above baseline. Even Captain Morgan, grudging and sour, had to acknowledge improvement. But his words carried warning. Numbers on a range don't always translate to combat. Didn't argue, she didn't need to. Because she knew the truth. The battlefield was coming, and when it did, the protocol would either hold or it would break. And so would she. Why did the summons always come at night? The knock rattled her door at 2:17. Sharp, urgent, no time for sleep. Slid from her bunk, boots laced by instinct. Outside, a runner stood stiff, his voice clipped. "Sergeant Hayes, command post, immediately." She didn't ask questions. Orders at this hour only meant one thing: something had gone wrong. The command post buzzed with tension. Maps covered the tables, satellite images flickered on screens. A small crowd of officers and senior NCOs circled tight, voices low but urgent. At the center, Lieutenant Colonel Parker stood like a pillar of calm in the storm. When she saw enter, her voice cut through the noise. "Hayes, you're with us." Captain Morgan's head snapped up. "Ma'am, with respect, she's not combat certified, she's never even deployed." Parker's eyes didn't waver. "She designed the protocol that half this room now swears by, and tonight that protocol may save lives." Froze, her pulse hammering. "Mission, deployment, now." Parker gestured to the map. 3 Marines pinned down in Al, small desert town, outskirts of cartel territory, recon patrol compromised. They're holed up in a burned-out garage. Ammo's running low, hostiles closing in. Air support can't get in, too much civilian presence. She tapped the red circle on the map. "Extraction team leaves in 20 minutes. Morgan's voice sharpened. "Put Hayes on overwatch if you insist, but I'll be leading the team." "No," Parker said, calm, firm, unyielding. "Staff Sergeant Cooper will lead the element. Hayes runs overwatch. If her protocol works tonight, we'll prove it." The room went silent. His throat tightened. She glanced at Cooper, who gave her the faintest nod, not mockery, not doubt, agreement. The decision was made. The desert swallowed them whole. The hello skimmed low across the dunes, its blades hammering the night. its red interior lights casting everything in ghostly hues. Checked her rifle for the 5th time, fingers brushing familiar grooves, steadying herself. 600 meters. That was her world. 600 meters where a single choice meant life or death. Cooper crouched opposite her, eyes scanning the map in his lap. When he caught her glance, he leaned in. His voice was low, meant only for her. "You ready for this?" She swallowed, then nodded. "Doesn't matter if I am, they're counting on me." A flicker of a smile touched his lips. "Good answer." The hello banked hard. Dust and debris whipped into the cabin. The crew chief shouted over the roar, 2 minutes. His chest tightened. 2 minutes until everything changed. They deployed fast. Cooper led his 6-man team into the alleyways, rifles raised, movements precise. Broke off, climbing the skeletal remains of a half-collapsed building. Each step jolted her knees, each breath drew dust, but she climbed anyway. High ground or nothing. She reached the rooftop, lungs burning. From here the town stretched out in shadow and flame. Sporadic gunfire echoed in the distance. Through her scope she scanned. Their movement, hostiles circling the garage, shadows darting between walls. 6, 8, no, 10 men, more than the intel had warned. Her throat went dry. "Cooper," she whispered into comms. "Garage surrounded, north alley compromised, 2 tangos on the roof adjacent." "Copy," Cooper's voice came, low and steady. "We'll move on your call." Inhaled, her father's words whispered back through time. "Half a breath, that's the difference." Her crosshairs settled. The first hostile dropped silently. She adjusted, fired again. A second collapsed before his body even hit the ground. "North alley clear," she reported. Cooper's team surged forward. Gunfire erupted, chaotic, thunderous. Civilians screamed from the shadows, caught in the storm. Tracked targets, picking them off one by one, forcing the noose to loosen. But then the shot. Sharp, heavy, the crack of a sniper rifle. Her scope jerked instinctively, finding the source. Rooftop, 700 meters, a glint of glass. Her stomach turned to ice. She whispered into comms, "Sniper, rooftop east." Cooper's voice came urgent, "Can you take him?" Adjusted, wind swirling, distance long, target half covered. Her femur ached at the memory of the rooftop, the moment she'd failed before. She steadied herself, precision with purpose. Half a breath, trigger squeeze. The sglint vanished into dust and silence. "Sniper down," she whispered. Cooper's reply came fierce, "Damn good shot, Hayes." But the battle wasn't over. Hostiles regrouped, pressing hard against the garage. Gunfire rattled. Through her scope, saw one Marine inside, the youngest, barely more than a kid, clutching his bleeding shoulder. His lips moved, but the mic didn't pick it up. Then she saw it. His mouth formed one desperate word. "Bandages." Her chest tightened. That single plea echoed across the years, across every failure, across every rejection. He wasn't asking for a hero. He was asking for survival. And she was the only one who could give him that chance. Whispered into comms, "Cooper, they're hit. They need med supplies now." "Copy," Cooper answered. "We're breaching." What followed was chaos. Explosions rocked the alley. Cooper's team crashed through the garage door, rifles blazing. Picked targets until her barrel smoked, covering every angle she could. It felt endless, a storm of noise, dust, blood, and fire. But slowly the tide shifted. Hostiles broke. The survivors fled into the dark. Silence returned, jagged and incomplete. "Objective secure," Cooper reported, his voice hoarse. Slumped behind her scope, her chest heaving. Sweat slicked her face, her hands trembling. She had done it. Not alone, not perfectly, but she had done it. The Marines were alive. Back at Fort Murphy, dawn broke over the desert like a revelation. The debrief was short, clinical. 3 Marines wounded but alive. 0 civilian casualties. 0 friendly fire. Parker's voice carried weight as she concluded. The protocol worked. Adaptation under stress saved lives tonight. This is no longer an experiment, it's doctrine. Applause filled the room, even reluctant ones. Even Morgan's silence couldn't drown it out. But didn't bask in it. Her mind replayed the kid's lips forming that one word, bandages, his eyes wide with fear. That was the reality beneath the data, beneath the doctrine. Not numbers, not accolades, just fragile lives balanced on fragile choices. Later, alone in her quarters, sat with her rifle across her lap. She whispered the words again, the ones that steadied her through every trial. Precision with purpose. But tonight she added something new. And purpose means people. Because that was what it all came down to. Not pride, not redemption, people. And she knew this was only the beginning. How far could the human body go before it gave up? The convoy rolled through the desert just after dawn, sunlight sharp and merciless. Rode in the second Humvee, her rifle laid across her knees. Cooper sat across from her, helmet tilted low, expression unreadable. The mission was routine, an escort for humanitarian aid trucks heading to a village by cartel skirmishes. But routine in Al was a lie. Parker's voice still echoed from the briefing. Expect contact. Always expect contact. The first half hour was calm. Too calm. The sand shimmered under the heat, the world stretching into an endless horizon. Marines cracked jokes over the comms. Even felt her shoulders loosen slightly. Then it happened. The explosion tore through the lead vehicle. A bloom of fire, smoke, and twisted steel. The blast wave slammed into her chest, stealing her breath. Contact, a Marine shouted over comms. Gunfire erupted from the bullets sparked against armor, ripped into sand, cracked overhead. The convoy scattered, vehicles swerving for cover. Dove out, hitting the dirt hard. Her rifle came up by instinct. Through the scope she caught glimpses of figures, 15, maybe 20 hostiles firing from high ground. Too many, far too many. Ambush North Ridge, she shouted into comms. They're boxed in. Cooper's voice barked back. Push south flank, haze cover. She fired, precise, calculated. One target dropped, then another. But for every hostile she hit, two more appeared. The air was alive with chaos, shouts, screams, the tearing roar of gunfire. Then came the second explosion. The Humvee behind her, a rocket-propelled grenade, fireball, shrapnel tore through the air like knives. Pain ripped through her leg, white-hot, shattering. She hit the ground, breath gone, ears ringing. She tried to rise and collapsed. Her femur, broken, worse than broken, shattered. The bone screamed with every twitch. She clawed for her rifle, dragging it close. Through the haze of agony she saw the truth. Cooper's team pinned down, Marines bleeding in the open, hostiles advancing. And her alone, immobile. Hopeless. The voice broke through the chaos. Bandages. It came raw, desperate from somewhere ahead. A Marine's cry. She couldn't see who. She just heard it, pleading, shattering like the echo of every failure she'd sworn never to repeat. Her vision blurred, pain clawed at her. Every breath felt stolen. She could lie here, let the desert take her, let someone else be the answer. But the cry came again, bandages. Something inside her snapped. No one was coming. She was the only one left. She gritted her teeth, rolled onto her stomach, and began to crawl. The first drag was agony. Gravel bit into her palms, her shattered leg dragging useless behind. She bit down on a scream, tasting blood. A meter, 2, 5. Each pull felt impossible, but she moved anyway. Her mind fractured into rhythms. Left hand, right hand, breathe. Ignore the leg, ignore the fire, ignore the bullets kicking dirt inches from her face. Just crawl. Meters turned into tens. Time lost meaning. The desert became endless, each grain of sand an enemy, each rock a mountain. She couldn't think of the whole 600 meters. She couldn't think of the distance. Only the next pull, the next inch. Halfway through, she blacked out. Came to with dirt caked in her mouth, sweat stinging her eyes. She forced her body forward again, clawing through the haze. Voices echoed distantly, Marines shouting, gunfire dimming, her own heartbeat pounding louder than everything. "Hayes, where are you?" Cooper's voice crackled over comms. She pressed her mic, her voice a rasp, crawling. A pause, then his voice broke, half disbelief, half fury. "You're insane, stay down." She dragged herself another meter, her hands slick with blood. Not an option. The garage came into view, collapsed walls, smoke rising, flashes of rifles inside. She was almost there, just meters now. Her body wanted to stop, to collapse and never rise again, but then she saw them. 3 Marines inside, wounded, pale, terrified. One clutching his chest, another pressing his hand against a torn shoulder. The youngest, barely out of training, staring at her with wide, desperate eyes. He mouthed it again, that single word. "Bandages." She reached them. The Marines dragged her inside, voices frantic. She fumbled with her pack, shoving supplies into their hands. Her fingers trembled, numb with exhaustion. "Tourniquets, compressions, keep pressure." Her words slurred, but the instructions carried. They worked with shaking hands, following her commands. Blood slowed, breathing steadied. Lives held on by threads, but they held. And in that moment, Hayes realized something she had never allowed herself to believe. She wasn't too slow, she wasn't a washout. She was here, and because she was here, they were alive. The fight raged around them. Cooper's team surged through, clearing the ridge with brutal precision. When he burst into the garage minutes later, his rifle smoking, his eyes fell on sprawled against the wall, her face gray with pain. "Jesus, Hayes," his voice broke low and fierce. "You crawled." She managed a weak smile. 600 meters, rough estimate. His jaw tightened. He dropped to his knees beside her, pressing a hand to her blood-soaked leg. "We're getting you out, now." She tried to answer, but the world tilted sideways. Darkness closed in. Her last thought before it swallowed her was simple. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did waking feel heavier than sleep? Opened her eyes to white light, blinding and sterile. The ceiling above her swam in and out of focus. For a moment she thought she was still crawling, still dragging herself through the desert, still hearing the desperate cries for bandages. But then the pain hit. Her leg was bound in thick casts and braces, suspended from a steel frame. The weight of it pressed into her chest, heavier than any bullet. Tubes ran into her arm. The steady beep of monitors pulsed like a metronome of survival. She wasn't on the battlefield anymore. She was in the field hospital. Alive. Her lips cracked as she whispered, "Status." A nurse appeared instantly, her voice soft but firm. "You're stable. Shattered femur. We stopped the bleeding, stabilized the bone. Surgery will follow when you're stateside." Alive but broken. The realization was a knife twisting slowly. She drifted in and out for hours, maybe days. Time blurred. Sometimes the tent was quiet, filled only with the low hum of generators. Other times it was chaos, stretchers rolling in, medics shouting orders, the smell of blood and antiseptic mingling in the heat. And always, always the faces. The young Marine clutching his chest, the one with the torn shoulder, their eyes when she reached them, their lips forming that desperate word. She had saved them, she knew it, but the thought brought no comfort. Because she hadn't saved herself. Cooper came on the 3rd day. She woke to find him sitting on a folding chair at her bedside, helmet still dusted with sand, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. "You look like hell," he said softly. Her voice was dry. "Feel worse." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on hers. "Word spreading, Hayes. They're saying you crawled 600 meters with a shattered femur. Marines you saved, they won't shut up about it. To them, you're a legend already." Her chest tightened. A legend, she didn't feel like one. She felt hollow. She turned her head, staring at the canvas wall. Legends don't end up in traction. For a moment he was silent, then his voice dropped low and sharp. Don't do that. Her eyes flicked back. Don't diminish what you did. You kept them alive. You gave me the chance to finish the fight. If not for you, we'd be zipping 3 body bags right now. His words struck deep, but so did the silence after. She whispered, and now what? I can't even stand. What good is a sniper who can't walk? Cooper leaned back slowly, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't figured out yet. Maybe walking isn't the only measure of what you can give. He left before she could answer. That night she dreamed. Not of the crawl, not of the firefight. She dreamed of her grandfather, sitting on the porch back home, rifle across his knees, the field stretching endless behind him. He never said much in her dreams, just looked at her with the quiet weight of a man who had carried his own battles. In the dream, he finally spoke. You don't measure worth in miles walked, you measure it in lives carried. She woke with tears burning her eyes. Rehabilitation began within a week. The doctors called it pre-surgical conditioning, called it humiliation. They made her sit up, swing her good leg off the bed, grip hand weights that felt like anvils. Every movement set her broken femur screaming. Sweat poured down her temples, her breath ragged. Some days she refused. She lay staring at the ceiling, motionless, bitterness coiled tight inside her. But the nurses were relentless, and so was Cooper. He visited often, never staying long. Sometimes he brought coffee, sometimes silence. Once he brought a folded note scrawled with shaky handwriting. It was from the Marine she had saved, the youngest one, barely 19. Sergeant Hayes, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but if you hadn't crawled, I'd be dead. I don't know how to say thank you, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying. Held the note for hours, her fingers tracing the ink. It was heavier than any metal. That night, she forced herself to sit up again. Weeks blurred, the pain dulled but never vanished. The brace became a cage she learned to live inside. Each movement was a negotiation between agony and progress. But the mental war was worse. Some nights she lay awake, staring at her leg, convinced her career was over. She replayed the crawl in her head, each meter etched into her bones. She wondered if it had been worth it, if survival meant losing everything she had fought for. And yet every morning she forced herself through the rehab. One more repetition, one more stretch, one more step towards something she couldn't yet name. The others saw only grit. They called her tough, unbreakable. But inside she felt fragile. Parker visited once, just before was airlifted stateside. The colonel stood at her bedside, hands clasped behind her back, her gaze steady. You redefined what it means to be a sniper, Hayes. Precision with purpose. That phrase is circulating through command already. The protocol is no longer a suggestion. It's becoming doctrine. His throat tightened. Doctrine won't put me back in the field. Parker studied her, eyes softening. Doctrine saves lives, Sergeant. And sometimes the ones who shape it don't have to be on the trigger to change the outcome of battles. She leaned closer, her voice quiet, intimate. You think your crawl ended your story, but sometimes the crawl is the story. Don't forget that. Couldn't speak, she could only nod. The flight home was long, silent, filled with the drone of engines and the weight of memories. Back in the States, the sterile halls of a military hospital became her world. Surgery, plates, screws, rehab. The crawl wasn't finished, it had only changed shape. And through it all, the same question haunted her. Was she done, or was this just another beginning? The doctors gave her probabilities. The brass gave her medals. The Marines she had saved gave her gratitude. But Hayes gave herself only silence. Because deep down, she knew the hardest fight wasn't behind her. It was ahead. Why was walking always the hardest part? Stood in the rehab gym, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the parallel bars stretching out in front of her like a battlefield. She had crawled 600 meters on a shattered femur, but now just 6 feet looked impossible. Sweat slicked her palms, her crutches leaned against the wall, the brace hugged her thigh, metal pins pressing into bone. The physical therapist waited patiently, clipboard in hand. Whenever you're ready. Inhaled, exhaled, and moved. Her first step was shaky, unsteady, a newborn deer learning its legs. Pain jolted sharp, but she held. The second step was worse. Her arms trembled as they gripped the bars, her teeth grinding. By the third, she nearly collapsed, but something inside whispered, "Not yet." Step 4, step 5, step 6. She reached the end, and for the first time since the desert, she allowed herself to believe walking wasn't gone forever. Weeks became months. The crawl gave way to steps, the steps to strides. By autumn, she could walk with a cane. By winter, she could limp unassisted, her gait uneven but her balance steady. Doctors called it miraculous. Command called it inspiring, but didn't see miracles. She saw scars, screws in her femur, nights of agony that stretched into dawn. She saw the cost. And yet, every time she looked in the mirror, she remembered the faces of the Marines she had reached. The 19-year-old's shaky note, Cooper's voice cracking when he saw her in the garage, Parker's words, "Sometimes the crawl is the story." Maybe the cost was the point. Recognition came, as it always did. The medal ceremony was staged on a bright spring morning. Cameras, flags, rows of Marines standing tall. The general himself pinned the ribbon on her chest, his voice booming. Sergeant Hayes demonstrated unparalleled courage under fire. Her actions saved 3 Marines and reinforced the core truth of our profession. Precision is nothing without purpose. Applause thundered, cameras flashed. Stood rigid, her leg aching under dress blues, her cane polished but visible. She forced a smile. She shook hands. She saluted. But when it ended, when the crowds dispersed, she slipped away quietly, medal still heavy on her chest. Outside in the quiet, she let herself breathe again. Because medals weren't the point. Lives were. Cooper found her later, sitting alone on a bench under the shade of an oak tree. His uniform was crisp, but his eyes carried the same fatigue she remembered from the desert. He sat beside her, silent at first. Then he said, "They're giving me a new team, deploying next month. I asked command to make you our trainer." Blinked, startled, "Trainer?" "Yeah," he said. "The protocol is spreading, but the recruits need someone to teach it right. You've lived it. No one else has." Her throat tightened. "I can't run with you. I can't climb rooftops." Cooper shook his head. "Doesn't matter. They don't need you on the rooftops. They need you here, in their heads, in their hands, making sure when chaos hits, they don't freeze, don't rush, don't repeat the mistakes that got good men killed." For a moment, stared at him, caught between gratitude and grief. Then she nodded slowly. "All right," she whispered, "Trainer." He smiled faintly, "Trainer." So it began again. Not on the battlefield this time, but on the range. Stood with a cane at her side and a rifle across her lap, watching new faces line up nervously. Young Marines, some barely 20, their pride fresh, their fear hidden behind smirks. She saw herself in them, the hesitation, the hunger, the quiet desperation to prove they belonged. And she gave them what no one had given her. Patience, precision, purpose. She taught them to breathe when their heart hammered, to pause when chaos demanded speed, to see through the fog, the smoke, the doubt, to remember that the mission wasn't numbers or medals, it was people, always people. Some resisted, some mocked, some failed and cursed her for it. But slowly, just as before, they learned. And when they did, she felt something stir inside her that medals could never give. Hope. The years passed quietly. Her limp never vanished. Some days it throbbed like fire. Other days it was just a whisper, a reminder, but she lived with it, walked with it, taught with it. The crawl never left her. The dirt, the blood, the 600 meters that felt endless. She carried it every day like weight on her shoulders. But it no longer haunted her. It guided her. One evening, long after the sun had dropped, she sat alone on the range. The air was cool, the stars scattered above like silent witnesses. Her cane leaned against the bench. Her rifle rested across her lap, familiar, steady. She thought of all the voices that had once defined her. Too slow, not combat material, washout. And she thought of the voices that had replaced them. Trainer, mentor, savior. But most of all, she thought of that one word, the one that had pushed her through every meter of agony. Bandages. Not glory, not honor, just survival. That was the truth of it. That was the heart of everything. And when she finally stood to leave, her cane tapping softly against the concrete, she whispered the words she wished her grandfather could hear. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The stars didn't answer. They didn't need to, because they already knew.